I
Hi
am
everyone,
Juliana
and
Lehman, the founder of Naturally Joyous and a real food nutritionist. And my guest today is a very special guest, and I'm very happy to have her here in the channel. So I have Dr. Cecilia here with me. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And our topic today is also very cool. So Dr. Cecilia is going to walk us through weight loss after pregnancy. As you guys know, we focus a lot on this channel on releasing excess weight naturally. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Cecilia properly in just a second. But she has two little ones, and she just had a baby about 6 months ago. So she has not only a lot of knowledge as a naturopathic doctor, but also a lot of real life experience on this topic that I'm very excited that she's going to be sharing with you. So I'm going to just kind of introduce you officially, and then we can get started. So Dr. Cecilia is a mother of two. She has a 4-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old son. She's also a naturopathic doctor and a health detective in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. Her goal is to find the root cause of her patient's symptoms via thorough health history and lab testing in order to formulate a customized treatment plan. The tools she uses in her practice include lifestyle counseling, nutrition, vitamins, herbal medicine, energy work, homeopathy, and acupuncture. Conditions she has treated successfully include fatigue, gas and bloating, weight gain, hormone imbalances, anxiety, depression, and insomnia, to name a few. Dr. Cecilia is also the naturopathic doctor that I recommend in my practice. So I'm very excited to have her here sharing her expertise with us. So officially, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So before we jump into, the weight loss component, I think it'd be really cool for our audience to hear your thoughts on during pregnancy, what is the, let's just say, normal or like a healthy amount of weight for a woman to gain? So give us some insights on that before we jump into the weight loss.
Absolutely. The studies show that if you are pregnant and you have a normal BMI, so BMI is based on your height and weight, and that's something that you can easily look up, based on your height and your weight. You can look up what your BMI is online, and it'll tell you if you are normal weight, if you are overweight or underweight. So it depends on where you start off. So when you're pregnant, and if you start off at a normal BMI, so normal height to weight, ratio, then normally sort of on 25 to 35 pounds of weight gain by the end of your pregnancy is considered normal. The higher your BMI is, so if you're in the overweight category, then the amount of weight gain during pregnancy is going to be less, right? It's sort of a proportional versus if you're underweight when you're pregnant, then you should want to gain more weight, right? Because you're trying to feed the baby and be as healthy as possible.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And I think it's a good starting point so people can have a bit of a number, right, as a target.
Exactly.
To really sort of base it
Because
off.
because if you are overweight already to start off with, and then you gain the same amount of weight as somebody who is a normal weight person, then you're going to really be, above that line, and there are risk factors around that. So being or getting too much weight in pregnancy, or starting off being overweight and then getting pregnant and gaining all that weight may increase your risk of things like diabetes, gestational diabetes. That's diabetes in pregnancy, which increases your sugar levels, which makes your baby bigger too. So, and then heart disease and things like that. So you want to check that with your OB or your midwife for sure.
Absolutely. So now jumping into the weight loss after baby, what would you say are some of the big mistakes that people end up doing when trying to, let's just say, quickly lose excess weight after pregnancy or after birth?
Yeah. So one of the things that as a female who, you compare your pre-pregnancy body and post, and we value how we look, and sometimes or a lot of times it doesn't go back to the way we were before very, very quickly. but to not, you know, be hard on yourself. And, you know, some of the things that, you know, people do is maybe rush into it a little too quickly, especially if you're breastfeeding. You got to be careful because you don't want to sort of crash diet, you know, and then lose breast milk for your baby. So you want to aim for about, you know, pound to pound and a half a week, but not right away. So especially those first 6 weeks, you're healing, you know, just enjoy your baby and relax as much as you can, and get as much sort of sleep as you can. But yeah, so those are, you know, some of the things maybe rushing into it, as well as, you know, when we start feeling better, let's say it's, you know, 6 week postpartum comes along and we have our discharge appointment from our OB or the midwife, and they say, you know what, like you're healing really well, whether it's a C-section or vaginal birth, you know, you're kind of good to go. You want to be careful not to over exercise and not to sort of do any type of high intensity work right away, because, you know, your core has expanded, right? Your abdomen has expanded, the muscles have expanded. I always recommend, you know, maybe getting assessed to make sure that you don't have that diastasis, which is the separation of the muscle wall and the abdomen. And you want to make sure you have a really strong core, because you don't want to then injure your back because your core is not strong enough. Now you're debilitated and you have to carry this baby and you're in pain, right? So exercise in moderation. Start with, you know, walking, making sure you're strengthening, you know, your core gradually, just so that your basic is met, and then work it up kind of, you know, slowly from there. And, you know, once you're in a good routine and you feel good and your body feels good, then, you know, there's no reason to slowly go back to what you were, you know, doing, provided you're, you know, you're not compromising breast milk production, for example, if you're breastfeeding, you know, that kind of thing. And then just being patient with your body, definitely. I mean, the more that we are acceptance of our body post pregnancy, the better, or the easier it will be to eventually lose weight as well. Because if we're stressed about all the time, if we, you know, don't want to look at any mirrors or anything like that, that kind of underlying stress makes us hold on to fat longer as well. So it's that that balance, you know, and it's easier said than done, I know, but you know, your skin is going to inevitably be a little bit more wrinkly and things like that's, you know, normal in terms of what your body has gone through, and appreciating, look, I actually created a human, you know, I birthed a human. That's pretty a remarkable accomplishment for the body to go through. So to be, you know, kind about that and just do your best, you know, and yeah, that's what I would, you know, say in terms of just watching out for. Yeah.
I love that. And even that compassion side that you said, right? That a lot of times, and I think women are often, you know, in this category, we're very high achievers and we have really short timelines. I have like very unrealistic time sense for what I need to accomplish myself, like when it comes to work and things like that. But I see that in a lot of the, you know, clients that I work with, because I think we attract similar people to us that want results really fast, right? But definitely that compassion side, like you just literally created a human, and your body, you know, like it or not, it is a trauma. Like birth is a trauma, right? To like muscles and everything else. And so that kind of like nicely leads us into another question that I have for you, which, so say somebody has their first child and somewhat quickly after they're able to bounce back and, you know, release a lot of that weight. What is the, say, tool in the body, on the body, or the consequence of multiple pregnancies when it comes to nutrients or hormones that makes it more difficult, the more babies you have, it makes it more difficult for you to lose weight after, say, 2 or 3 babies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is the truth that, you know, the more, for the majority of women, the more babies that they have, sort of the harder it becomes to lose the weight. Often, you know, they say on average, like 2 to 5 pounds is what you tend to keep on after the, you know, your pregnancy. And if you're already, you know, over what you were before, and then you add on another baby, and then you add in that again, right? So the multiple pregnancies, and by multiple pregnancies, not like twins, obviously, but in terms of, yeah, subsequent pregnancies will, you know, because you know, your body is sort of, you know, more expanding, more hormones, and a lot of stuff is going on in your body. And so, you know, when we're breastfeeding, for example, we make prolactin, which is a hormone that also increases our appetite. Because one of the things that we need to keep up with is, enough calories. They say 500 extra calories a day for breastfeeding. So, it's there on purpose, right? To sort of make sure that we're not underweight. It's worse to be underweight than it is to be a little bit above weight when we've just had a baby, and especially during breastfeeding as well. So, and then water, we need to drink a ton of water when we're breastfeeding as well, just as sort of an aside. But yeah, the reality is that it is true that, the more babies that you have, you do tend to, gain more weight, if that makes sense, or have more difficult time losing it. The goal, or ideally before you sort of have your second and then your third, is that you're try to be back to your normal BMI, if you will, as much as possible before you become pregnant, so that you can kind of go back to that. But if you already start off again being, let's say, overweight at your next subsequent pregnancy, then it tends to spiral upwards that way. So just being mindful of that, is important. But at the same time, again, compassion, right? Again, what our body goes through to make all these babies. You'll notice, for me, for example, after my first, I found that, breastfeeding, just breastfeeding alone, I kind of lost all the pregnancy weight fairly quickly. I got, you get busy and then you forget to eat breakfast or something like that. And then, my weight went down even like a bit lower than pre-pregnancy. I mean, you don't want that. And so I obviously had to be mindful of that, just because, with breastfeeding, stuff like that. But, I noticed it a lot more with the first. With the second, despite the same thing, still breastfeeding exclusively for the first 6 months and things like that, it wasn't as great of an impact in terms of sort of calorie burning. And so, you just have to, because probably, again, it's that second child, right? And so you have to be aware of that, and, watch out, the kinds of foods that we're eating, especially, during a time when we're maybe at home a lot, whether it is a pandemic or you just have a newborn or whatever it is. It's easy to not have time to make meals. And that's where it's important to have that support group around you, whether it's a partner, a spouse, a family member, a good friend, that for those initial stages can maybe help with making really good, healthy meals that are ready to go. So you're not having to cook up a storm when you're taking care of a baby as well, or even prepping for that before the baby comes. You've got frozen meals ready, things like that, right? So whole foods is going to be important, so that we're not tempted to be like, oh, I'm hungry, I got to eat. But then the only thing that's sort of available is sort of something that's prepackaged and processed and quick. But then it's not going to be those healthy nutrients that we need to feed our own body, and our baby's body. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that I would say around there, and then just the other thing I wanted to mention actually is one of the things that can happen. So when we're pregnant, the need for thyroid hormone is increased. So because we're growing this baby, right? This baby will take precedence, meaning that the body is you're gonna, all of your iron, or a lot of it anyway, is gonna go to the baby. Your calcium is gonna go to the baby, all of the nutrients, because the body is in pregnancy mode and just wants to grow as healthy of a baby as possible, and may compromise your own reserves. And thyroid is really important for the development of the baby as well. And the thyroid, which is located in our neck here, is kind of our is a gland that helps with our metabolism. So if our thyroid is under functioning, then our metabolism will be slower. We might have more difficult time losing weight. We might have slower bowel movements, things like that. So because when we're pregnant, there is an increased demand for our thyroid to work optimally. Sometimes once we've had our baby, the thyroid kind of bounces back down, because it's like, oh, I'm not pregnant anymore. And it may not bounce back to optimal as quickly. And so if our metabolism is already on the lower end, then it'll also be difficult to lose weight. And so I urge my patients to get their thyroid checked. Usually if you go see a midwife or a gynecologist, they'll check those things, because it is important for pregnancy, right? They're going to check TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone, and they just make sure that you're not you don't have a thyroid disease, or you're not hypothyroid full on. But as a naturopath, I'm looking more than just at that TSH, which is the hormone that the brain sends to the thyroid. I'm looking at the thyroid hormones themselves, T3, T4. I'm looking also at antibodies, because the most common cause of low thyroid function is autoimmune. And so basically all I'm saying is that if you're trying to get pregnant, if you are pregnant, even post-pregnancy, just getting a full thyroid panel done and looking at all those markers just to make sure that that is not something that's inhibiting you from having a strong metabolism, from losing weight, from having the energy that you need to care for your baby, I think is really important. Because then if it comes out to being, you know what, you've developed an autoimmune condition to your thyroid, which can happen post-pregnancy, for example, then there's a lot that we can do to help with that. And diet is a big piece of that too, right? And making sure that the gut is working really well and things like that. So I would say that's another piece that just to keep in mind, because it's not something that maybe we know or we think about with regards to, weight loss and energy and metabolism and things like that.
That's amazing. And that is actually something that, not because of pregnancy, but I really relate to, because my TSH, and I'll say for the last, I don't know, like 7, 8 years, I kind of measure like blood work like every year, and I keep track of my records, and I just kind of now he moved, but I used to have a wonderful family doctor that would like really kind of give me a lot of support in there because of all my health issues. So my TSH was like textbook for so many years, but I knew my metabolism was slow, and I was struggling with weight at that time. And it wasn't until I've done a full functional thyroid panel that I saw that my hypothyroidism was related to really high thyroid antibodies, right? And I was shocked. So I took gluten out specifically for that reason at that time, and saw such changes in how I felt. And it was kind of like, we've been in this field for so many years, right? And to kind of experience in ourselves firsthand is such a powerful thing. And I thought, my T3 and T4 were really well within the ranges, but it was specifically my thyroid antibodies that were like so elevated. So it's really like, I think, to be honest, like anybody really struggling with weight likely should have their thyroids checked in this more functional way anyways, regardless of being postpartum or just on a regular weight loss journey.
Yeah, you bang on exactly, right? It's that discovering of like, oh, I had no idea that that was a problem. And the truth is that, the medical system does a really good job at making sure you don't have a full-on disease. But when it comes to sort of autoimmune, that's where it becomes challenging, because there isn't always that one drug. It's usually more of a functional thing, meaning, diet or a nutritional deficiency or something like that should be explored, in addition to the fact that cortisol, which is our stress hormone, just to finish off the hormone piece. But yeah, it will, when we have a baby, we're under a lot of stress, and, rightfully so. We have this baby we're taking care of, and we're also sleep deprived, and all of those things can contribute to more stress hormone being produced, which will also make our body tend to hold on to fat around the waistline too, right? So, again, looking at the hormonal balance, post-pregnancy, when you're ready to lose weight, and maybe when you're not exclusively breastfeeding, when the baby is starting to, also have solids and things like that, is a good time to check what has my body been going through, and what is going on, to avoid some of those things. So yeah, absolutely.
That's wonderful. And what are some of the nutrients that are important? I know you mentioned iron and calcium, and I know, of course, the importance is also during pre-pregnancy, but also during pregnancy, not just post. But what would be some of those key nutrients that you may not be getting enough from food to compensate for what got depleted during pregnancy?
Yeah, a good question. Thanks for bringing that up. That is something that I talk a lot about, actually. And so when we're trying to conceive, the idea, especially when I have patients who, whether they're already pregnant or they want to get pregnant or they're post-pregnant, there are different stages. There are a lot of things that are similar in all of those stages. Pre-pregnancy, if you're trying to get pregnant, the idea is to have the best quality egg and the best quality sperm, right? So pre-pregnancy, when you're trying to conceive, ideally both the male and the female body is taken care of as much as possible. So that might mean extra antioxidants, good, really just being really careful around, pesticides and things like that. Whole foods, of course, a lot of colorful fruits and vegetables, And then obviously I would assess the person and see, where they're at when they start off. And then of course, folic acid is the thing that's the most sort of known when it comes to pregnancy. Your medical doctor will tell you, make sure that you're on folic acid or a prenatal vitamin before, during, and I recommend postpartum as well, for at least the first 6 months postpartum, because usually if you are breastfeeding, a lot of nutrients get taken from you. And so, folic acid, is sort of what we know most about, but in reality, or preferably, you'd want to be on a prenatal vitamin or a vitamin complex that has the folic acid in its active form. So methyl tetrahydrofolate, or something that says folate in it, is better, because a lot of us genetically have a difficult time converting the inactive to the active form. And so just to bypass the genetic possibility of that happening, it's better to choose, if you can, look at your vitamins and look at what form these are in. This is what I do a lot in my practice when I have patients come in. I say, bring in what you're taking. It doesn't matter to me where you get your stuff, or even what brand it is necessarily, provided that obviously what's on the label is actually in the bottle, but also that the forms of the ingredients are ideally all active, and that there's not a lot of excipients. Excipients are the added ingredients in a lot of supplements. Those are fillers. Sometimes there's coloring agents in there. Sometimes there's talc. I mean, you got to read these things through, right? And you don't want to be adding, especially when you're pregnant, you don't want to be adding extra things, even if it's in small amounts. In my opinion, it can make a difference too. So, as well as absorption, how well is this vitamin absorbed? So folate is what you want to look for. Things like B12, ideally, if you want to look for either, methylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. You ideally don't want something that has cyanocobalamin. Again, these are long and complicated words, but if you read your vitamins, you can kind of see, or it should say, what form these vitamins in. Vitamin D is huge, right? So that's another one. If you can get tested for, whether it's pre, during, and after pregnancy, just to make sure, because your need for vitamin D, it acts as a hormone, but it's also really important for mood, for the immune system, for the bone, right? For the absorption of calcium. As I mentioned, calcium is really important for the development of bone. And the other thing that's really important for bone development, for the baby especially, is vitamin K2. So vitamin K2 is a fat soluble vitamin. It's not the same as K1. K1 is the one that we see a lot of in green leafy vegetables. And so, but, ideally you're having a lot of that food, of course, to have vitamin, K1, but K2 actually brings the calcium into the bone, and it's found in fermented soy, which is natto, but it tastes really terrible. And so you're not gonna, it's not realistic to say I'm going to eat natto every day and forgo taking vitamin K2, for example. It's going to be easier to take that, as a supplement, to make sure that the calcium that you're getting, and that you're getting from either food or even the prenatal supplement, that it's actually going into the bone, so that the baby's jaw and teeth and head and all of the bone development happens really well. And then the other nutrient to look out for is iodine. Iodine has been shown in the research to really help the development of the brain of the baby, especially. And of course, iodine is part of thyroid function too. So, you can get it, through food, of course, but it's often, we don't find it a lot in our food, like seaweed and fish and things like that. So we don't always get enough of it from our diet. And so having a little extra as part of the prenatal, if you're going to take, that one supplement anyway, it's better if it has all of these things checked off, so that you can, not be too stressed, in terms of thinking that I'm not getting enough from the diet. Obviously, diet, is key, right? I mean, we know this, lots of green leafy vegetables, lots of colorful fruit, lots of just vibrant colors that have a lot of the micronutrients in there. And also good protein is definitely important. Ideally higher quality, protein. So you don't need to have, a ton of meat, but if you can at least choose more organic, more grass-fed, that kind of thing, you don't need as much of it, but it'll be healthier for you and for your baby, as well. So those would be sort of the the key vitamins to look out for. The other thing that can be really nice is, so if you prebiotic is really important. So those are your vegetables. That's going to feed the good bacteria. I often recommend to my patients, just before they are giving birth, to possibly just add in a bit of a probiotic, because we just really want to make sure that the flora is really good, because when the baby comes through the vaginal flora, it gets the really good bugs and things like that. So, that can be helpful. And then the only other thing would be omega-3. So omega-3 fish oil, that is an anti-inflammatory. It's found in fish, but unfortunately, a lot of bigger fish have a lot of heavy metals in them. And so we don't want to have too much of that, especially when pregnant, right? They say to stay away from tuna and things like that. So, unless you're going to have sardines, which are, a smaller fish, they're great food because they have lots of protein. They've got calcium in them because the bones are so small, and they have lots of omega-3s. They are very low in heavy metals because they're a small fish. So it's kind of the perfect food. But the truth is that, especially when you're pregnant, you're probably going to have an aversion to something that smells
Yes.
strong. And it's not going to be, even if you love sardines, everyone's going to eventually get sick of it. It's not realistic to maybe have it every day or anything like that. I mean, still incorporating it if you can, awesome. But the truth is that most people will go and it's better to get than an omega-3 supplement, where you look at the EPA and DHA content of your fish oil. So you want to make sure. Usually I tell the general person, I mean, it depends. If you're already overweight, you might want to have a bit more, but depending on where you start off with and how much you've been taking pre-pregnancy, usually I recommend probably, like, if you can do 1,200, 1,500 even milligrams of combined EPA and DHA minimum, a day. So, take a look at the fish oil that you can grab, the better. Liquid usually is more concentrated, so usually you just need like a teaspoon a day. But when you're, especially that first trimester, when you're feeling nauseous and not, sometimes having an oil like a fish oil, even if it doesn't taste like fish, can be a bit challenging. So that's where, taking like a capsule or something that can be better. But those are the ones where it's sometimes hard to get all from our diet. And so looking at, a really good quality. So just to summarize, really good quality prenatal that has, active form of folate, active B12 in them, has vitamin K2 in there, has iodine in there, right? Even if you can have extra sort of, or make sure that has like calcium, magnesium, most of them have anyway. So if you can have that, if you can have a fish oil, and then if you can have, often you need extra vitamin D, because what's in the prenatal usually is about 1,000 units of vitamin D. And for a lot of people, that's not sufficient to get to optimal. That's where you want to check your blood, right? Because you don't want to overdo it either, but you want to see where you're at. And then, so yeah, the fish oil, the vitamin D, and the prenatal would be sort of that. If you can do that during your pregnancy and then post-pregnancy, I would want to maintain that again until you're not breastfeeding anymore, and then we can reevaluate and assess those things, because your baby is kind of getting, again, all that nutrient, whether it's in the womb or breastfeeding and things like that. So yeah, I think that covers the the vitamins and minerals and things like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then one thing I'll add on the iodine that I tell a lot of clients is, before, I would say, the fancy Himalayan sea salt trend kind of took place, we used to use just regular table salt, right? That is iodized, because
Right.
from what I have learned, when the world, experienced goiter, which is one of the forms of thyroid disease, it was one of the cheapest way for governments worldwide to provide iodine in the diet, because most people can afford salt. So salt is iodized, on top of. But now when we buy the very expensive $10 little, salt shaker, it is not iodized, right? Because it is more pure and less things added to it. And I feel a lot of people are potentially missing out on a source of iodine that we took for granted for so many years. So usually what I recommend there as a bit of an insurance policy, like 2 ways, you can potentially mix half and half, like real regular table salt that is iodized with your fancier sea salt. Or what I do at home is that I buy powdered or granulated dose flakes, which is one of the seaweeds that you mentioned that is fairly high in iodine. And then I just mix that into my little salt shaker. So as I'm sprinkling that, it's always kind of, some of it is already being added to the food, so I don't forget to add extra. But I just wanted to kind of add that, because a lot of
That's
people
a
use
great tip. Yeah.
may not be getting their extra iodine in there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. That's perfect.
So the one thing that I love to do as, we close and you share so much good information, so grateful to have you speak with us today, is let's just get some practical tips. And I always like to kind of like give the information like you've done and then close with something that people can kind of like do and get started. So give us a couple of options of things that people can do if they haven't had a baby and they are struggling to lose excess weight after pregnancy and they want to, get on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what can you do? You've had your baby and you're struggling to lose weight. It's a juggling act, right? Because before you even had kids, right, you can more easily set a time to maybe go to the gym when they're open, or, and do these things. Once you have kids, it does become more challenging. You have to be a lot more efficient with your time. So, one of the things is even just starting off with walking, because like I said, just watch out to not start it too early. But once your body is healed, you get the okay from your doctor that you're good to go, and you're not compromising your milk supply. If all of that is checked off and you're able to have a strong core, then and learn to do that. Maybe a pelvic floor physiotherapist can help around that as well to kind of assess those muscles. But once you're able to do that, so you don't compromise your back, then you're kind of good to go in terms of getting on a plan. So what can that look like? So basically, some of the basic things, making sure you're drinking enough water. So water is something that we sometimes forget to drink and is really important for weight loss. Also, it can curb a little bit of that appetite a bit, so you just want to make sure you have enough water, because sometimes when we feel hungry, it's really, we're thirsty. So drink lots and lots of water. Start off with walking a lot, especially if you're lucky enough to, have a baby when the weather is nice out. Going out for walks is a great way to sort of get the body moving without sort of starting, hardcore and doing like HIIT exercise or anything like that. So walking is great. You can, if you want to sort of strengthen your muscles, there are programs out in the community like stroller fit and stuff like that, where you're pushing your baby with the stroller, but you can also exercise at the same time. So maybe that means that, instead of just walking, you're actually lunging while you're walking, right? So lunging is the muscle mass of your lower body, which is where most of our muscle lies anyway. So you can start doing things like that, walking and then going to, a park area or, area with grass or something, and then stretching and using even the stroller to help with those kinds of things. Those are some great ways. So you're not only getting out and you're still with your baby, but you're also able to exercise. If you are able to, get, for free, there's lots of, let's say, yoga videos and stuff like that you can even do from the comfort of your home. If you're, have a space for it, adding those kinds of exercises can be really, beneficial there. The other thing is, again, once you have that green light and you're not compromising milk supply and you're feeling really good and you've healed really well, something that you can start to implement is something like intermittent fasting, where you're only eating for, let's say, 6 or 8 hour chunks of the day, and then you're just having water for the rest of the day. But again, that's not something to jump into right away. That's something that you can do later on. That can sometimes be really helpful for weight loss, to increase that metabolism and not constantly, snacking. And then, of course, like I mentioned, having as much as you can the planning piece. So having as much pre-prepared healthy foods that you can easily grab, whether it's defrost or heat up in the oven or whatever, so that you're not tempted to grab those prepackaged high sugar, high glycemic index foods. So, seeing a nutritionist like you is going to be a great way to come up with a plan to say, okay, well, these are some great meals that you can make quickly, that you can maybe make a batch of, so you've got it ready to go. Maybe invest in some Tupperware containers that you can make individual portions for, so it's frozen and kind of ready to go. And then it's almost like, pretending to have your personal chef. It's kind of already there, right? And you're just doing all the prep work, ahead of time. That is definitely going to be really, really helpful. And just watching out how much chocolate, how much sugar, how much snacks, how much of that we are consuming. We don't realize it. Sometimes, maybe we're watching TV and we're mindlessly eating, and those are a lot of added calories. So you just want to kind of keep an eye out for that. I also find that sometimes having that diet diary where you write down what you've eaten for the day can be helpful for some. It's not always good for everyone, but just even to have it on paper, like, holy crap, I didn't realize maybe that I was eating a lot of these foods, or oh man, that bag of chips, it was the whole bag, it wasn't just a portion, or that kind of idea can sometimes be helpful for awareness, without driving ourselves nuts either, right? The idea is not to be, oh, I got to be perfect now, or it's again, it's that balance. You don't want to drive ourselves crazy. We don't want to weigh ourselves every day, right? And that's not the idea. The idea is sort of, how well do our clothes fit? Is it starting to look better? Are you able to increase your exercise, where you're doing a lot more sort of strength training exercise and things like that, so you can build muscle and burn more fat, going out for walks? That kind of idea, I would say, is a really great starting point. And then once you're a year postpartum, your baby is a year old, if you're still needing to lose, let's say, a few more pounds or whatever, that's where you can kind of fine tune it, where maybe checking again those hormone levels, making sure that that's not compromising your success, working with a nutritionist, working with a naturopath, having your team of people around you to help guide you and motivate you, right? Sometimes having an app can be helpful, where you can track your progress, that kind of thing, where it gives you meal plans and things, ideas that way. And I think you have lots of resources around that as well. So all of that is, it's about, and then surrounding yourself with a really good support system as much as you can, with reaching out to friends or family who can be there to support you and sort of cheer you on, because it's easy to feel down on ourselves when we we measure ourselves on the scale, like, that number hasn't changed, I've tried all these things. It's easy to just be like, well, screw that, I'm just going to eat cookies anyway. You know what I mean? So so it's good to have that support system, and maybe even going into a practitioner. For example, I have a body composition machine where I can look at your percent body fat and how much water is in and out of your cells. And that can sometimes be a motivating factor to say, you know what, even if my number on the scale hasn't moved, I've actually increased muscle mass and I'm actually healthier for it, right? So things like that can help also our perception of, keep going, you're doing well, and so yeah, that's what I would say.
Absolutely, that's awesome. The one thing I'll add to that, I usually recommend, if people, because sometimes say somebody's eating an entire bag of chips, and then I can give them a recipe for homemade kale chips, but may not be the necessarily the next step, right? Like, so for in between, if somebody is struggling with portion control and eating a lot of the chocolates and the chips and things, I sometimes recommend that they switch to something like the individual portion. So it's a little bit more packaging, so it's not as sustainable. But for example, say you go to Costco and you get the chocolate that's one that's wrapped. So that becomes your portion, rather than relying on willpower to put away the rest of the bar of chocolate, right? Or the big bag of chips versus the little one that, some kids take just as a snack, and using those single serving tools to be able to at least do one step in the right direction. Then hopefully the next step is switching to a whole food version of whatever that craving is, right? Which is usually what I do a lot in my YouTube channel, in my Instagram, with like a healthy version of a peanut butter cup, a healthy version of an ice cream, and just kind of eventually cover there. But maybe a step in between would be those prepackaged but single serve portions as well. So just wanted to kind of throw that in.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? Those single serving packages, those things that are sort of like, okay, I know that, or, grabbing a bowl and be like, okay, this is as much as I'm allowing myself to eat. And then, yeah, ideally, if you can have a spouse or a partner or somebody there that's also kind of following similar rules, or at least being like, hey, don't grab more, like you've had your, your quantity, and maybe then having better snacks, like, if it's fruits and veg, maybe that's more unlimited. And, I find too, personally, I find the evening is the hardest when it comes to snacking, especially when you do shop at Costco and there's big, packaging and things like that, where I find what helps is if I pre-cut up a bunch of fruit or veg and hummus, and then I have it sort of almost like a platter, and then I put it there, and then that's a guiltless or more of a guilt-free sort of mindless eating, because I know I'm grabbing something healthy, that if I'm watching a show or working on the computer, and then the stuff that's worse for us, things like, like you said, the chocolate, like single serving ideally, or chips, and then that's where the portion control. So it's like, it's whatever's here, and that's it. I'm not getting up to get more kind of idea. But yeah, you're right. Those are all great tools to help manage the quantity that we end up sometimes consuming without even realizing it. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think of all the things you shared and all the tips and suggestions, I think as we close it, coming back to that compassion side, I think it's so important, right? Because you and I talked about this prior before, weight release or weight loss is such a complex issue. I say to people, even if it's belly fat, it's not a localized issue, it's a metabolic issue, right? And after pregnancy, like you said, you have your thyroid, you could have potentially nutrient deficiency. So you're throwing in, it's almost like a car, and you take it to the mechanics, and the mechanics technically knows what's happening. They can do diagnostics and stuff. It's similar for the human body, right? We do testing things on a functional level to sort of understand what are the pieces that are not working properly, because even though the symptom may be in your belly, it could be something in your adrenals and cortisol production or blood sugar and parasites. So it could be so far removed from the location where the symptom lies that really using that detective mindset, right? But also knowing, because it is so complex, to allow the time for the body to heal and allow the pace that the body goes through is always the right pace for your body, right? Because your body has that ability to heal, but sometimes you need to make room to let that happen. And I love that you started with that compassion side, because I think people need to hear more instead of do weight loss fast and push, 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 is maybe like slow down, take that first step. And
Yeah,
then
you're absolutely right. I think, yeah, it's one thing to know that, hey, I know that eating that whole bag of cookies is bad for me, but it's another thing to say what's going to implement those changes for me to have enough, willpower and be in that right set of mind. If we're having postpartum depression, which is very common, for example, and we're feeling blue and we're sleep deprived, the last thing in our mind is going to be to like make sure we eat healthy. Like we're just, so there's a lot of layers to that. It's sort of, that's why yeah, I'm sure with your practice as well, it's about getting to know the person that's sitting across from me and understanding where are they coming from, where are their struggles, and trying to help as much as we can, whether that's making encouragement, maybe it's baby steps, maybe it's just taking a step back and saying, what, there's too much tracking going on here. It's driving you crazy. Maybe the stress is too much and that's causing you to not be able to lose the weight. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's many layers and many factors when it comes to weight loss. It's not usually a one size fits all. Here's the program and take it and go. It's are you able to do it? Are you where's your mind at? What's your support system like? And can you access these healthier foods and things like that? So it's very complex, and that's, I think, where we shine as practitioners to really try to, as much as we can, to cater to where that person is at, to help them along the way, along with increasing that compassion, like you mentioned, for our own body, and to praise those baby steps. Maybe it's a couple pounds only that you lost, and maybe, or maybe it's you gained some muscle and it's, it's big, or maybe it's just, hey, you know what, I've actually had less sugar this week. I actually didn't, eat as much chocolate, or like even little things like that are worth praising, and that hopefully is a motivating factor to kind of keep going, right? So yeah,
mindset is such an important component of it. I call it one of the three main pillars of all the work that I do on the weight loss release side of things, because I feel a lot of times when we pressure ourselves to just something that we naturally don't want to, then you're constantly needing that external motivation, and that's not a sustainable way to live, right? So just kind of working on the mindset and compassion and gratitude for self, I think, is such a powerful thing to do. And a lot of times it shifts things, that you start looking at things differently. Rather than that obligation to do something, it becomes a lot more pleasant and joyful, and then we're able to sustain it long term. No, that's wonderful. So for people that are interested to learn more from you, and I know you do wonderful things on social media, but also in terms of finding you, if they want to come see you for assessments or, the lab work that we talked about, what are the best ways for people to reach you?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, if anybody, is interested in, like you said, getting, their hormone levels, or even just a full-on assessment, maybe a plan, a starting point, the best way to reach me would be basically, you can check out my website. So www.willowwellnessclinic.com. So it's Willow like the tree, Willow Wellness Clinic. I'm in Waterloo. I'm near Grand River Hospital. We are now doing virtual visits as well as in-person visits. So we have the option. If you go onto my website, there is an online booking link, so you can book online and you can select what kind of appointment type that best suits you. And so, that's the best way. I'm also on Facebook, if I'm streaming right now live. So for anybody who's, watching or who wants to like my page, Willow Wellness Clinic, you should be able to find it, but I'm sure we'll add some links below the video as well.
Yeah.
You can kind of check out. That's where, a lot more of that social media stuff it comes out. And then if you want to be added to the newsletter or just want to know if we would be a right fit for you, I do have a free 15-minute sort of consultation option that I have virtually where we would talk over camera or even just over the phone to make sure that I would be a right fit for you. Naturopathic medicine is covered by most extended healthcare benefits, so that helps a lot of people out as well. So take a look at your plan if it does cover it. But yeah, or sending us an email at info@willowwellnessclinic.com and we can kind of answer any questions that you have in terms of that as well. And if you want to be added to our newsletter too, I send out, health articles as well as updates to the clinic with everything that's going on as well.
Yes.
So, again, just send us an email at info@willowwellnessclinic.com and we're more than happy to add you to our list as well and help you out wherever you are in your journey. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. It's such a needed topic, and I really love the direction that the conversation went. And I love those real conversations that really tell people maybe not like the pretty side of things and the quick and way to do it, but the real truth behind it. And you've done a great job at kind of giving us a lot of information on the nutrients and the hormones and how everything kind of plays together. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the audience for listening all this long. So appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I hope to have you again on the channel at some point in the future.
Yeah. I love doing this stuff. So thank you again.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.